Today, it is our pleasure to introduce you to Laura Barnard. Best known as the PMO Lady, Laura Barnard helps organisations to use the PMO construct to drive business transformation and deliver high-impact outcomes across their strategic initiative portfolio. Laura, tell us a little about how you came into the PMO space.
Oh, now that is a fun story. So my background is actually, believe it or not, in computer science and technology. I have actually, you can see it right there on the behind me on the wall. I have a computer science degree, and I was one of 4 women in my graduating class. And I loved technology and math and science and solving problems. And then as I was working as a technologist, I was able to be a part of some really big transformational changes from way early in my career. And a part of those changes, and being a part of those changes, I was able to see that there was this role where a person would bring everyone together to solve the problems. And I immediately fell in love. And then I learned that was called project management. And I was like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do with my life. That's it.
There is a name for it.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm the one that'll grab the whiteboard marker, go to the whiteboard and start facilitating, solving problems, and asking people to, come together to make cool things happen. So I loved really big, cool things. I loved making cool transformational stuff happen. And I loved project management. And then here we are, maybe 2 or 3 big transformational changes in. It's the dot-com craziness of the late 90s. And I was working in an e-commerce organization that was building e-commerce sites for brick and mortar stores. Okay. And after being a project manager there for a while, they tapped me on the shoulder and said, okay, we need you to put all of this together. We need a big picture perspective of all the projects we're running. We need to figure out how to streamline and optimize what we're doing. We got to figure out how to give the project managers the support they need. We need process. We need structure. We need to move fast. And by the way, the minute we sign the contract, we are behind because our clients are all saying, okay, so it only takes a day to get a website up and running for me, right? And this is back when it actually took a lot longer than that to build an e-commerce solution. So, I was asked to build and run my first PMO in 1999, and then spent 15 years inside organizations building and running PMOs and transformation organizations, and really getting a chance to be a part of really big, fun, cool change. And I just loved it. And along the way, like back in 1999, you couldn't just Google how to set up a PMO and get answers. That wasn't out there yet. And now if you do it, you'll get 8 or 9 million results. And most of it is confusing as heck, or it won't really help you. And over the years, I kind of learned, hey, when I do the stuff the books are telling me to do, when I do the stuff that is based on, theory, it doesn't work. And my business leaders get very unhappy. So when I started doing what actually made sense and learned a lot of those lessons, I realized, I understand now. I understand what it takes to build a PMO that drives a big impact in an organization. And my business leaders were begging for us to be involved and begging for us to be a part of it. So, and be a part of the solution. So now, since leaving being an employee inside organizations in the role of a PMO leader, 7 years ago, I started PMO Strategies because time and time again, I would hear myself saying, I wish I had me when I was you.
You were
and that's really how it all got started.
Yeah, you're ahead of the curve really at that time, because it really is in the last 25 odd years or so that PMO and project management is recognized as a science and a discipline in its own right. And there are many stakeholders around the table as well. So from your project manager right through to the head of PMO.
Right.
And really, we're all on the same side of the table, I get. But what is the best way to get your project manager to the organization's strategy table?
So see, that's a good one. And I think it's one that's, interestingly, way back when I first started doing professional speaking, the first panel I ever spoke, the panel was the first thing I ever did, to speak publicly. And I was scared to death. And I was so worried I would say the wrong things. And then somebody in the audience asked me a question. They said, why is it that I don't have my seat at the table? Why is it that they don't understand that project managers belong here? And That's all it took. I said, give me that microphone and let me tell you something. I lost all my butterflies and immediately went into, oh, no. That's not how it works. See, the challenge we have is that a lot of project leaders and PMO leaders, we feel that because we have the information, which we do, that our business leaders should just invite us to have a seat at the table and that we just belong there. But I think there's so much more that we need to do to earn that right to sit at that table. And it requires us to maybe shift a little bit about the way we think about the work we do and how we talk about the work we do. You see, we really have an opportunity, and that's why I call my community impact drivers. PMO and project leaders really have an opportunity to drive greater impact in the organization. And in fact, in times of chaos and stress and ultimate VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, project leaders in the project management profession and PMO leaders are the best well-positioned in the organization to drive change, to lead people through chaos and get to the other side of it. But we've got to start thinking and acting and talking like business leaders if we want to be seen as business leaders and be invited into that conversation, which means no more project management speak at people, no more putting templates, tools, and process in front of solutions, outcomes, and return on investment, right? So there's absolutely a path, but we have to really shift the way we think about the role and talk about the work we do if we want to be invited into those conversations.
So I'm going to come back to some of those topics in a minute, your golden triangle, but you mentioned chaos, and right now in July 2020, we're in the midst of the COVID-19 global pandemic. So our topic today is why COVID-19 is a golden opportunity for project managers. So give us the skinny on that, Laura.
Sure. And listen, I know this year has been incredibly tough for people, and us personally, my family, my friends, we've been directly impacted by this pandemic very personally. And so I don't shortchange the negative side of all of this. It's very real, and it's something that's affecting a lot of us. And when we have our business hats on, when we have our project and PMO leader hats on, and we're in the office, I know many of us, when all of this started, went into panic mode, rightfully so. Not just us, our business leaders did too. All of a sudden, businesses were being turned upside down and changes were happening overnight. And a lot of PMO and project leaders kept saying, what do I do? And we all went into a little bit of a panic mode. That's totally fair. And we also have an opportunity to move past that and step into a role sitting at that table with our leadership team to help them answer and address the information, the questions, the what if scenarios that they're all dealing with, right? Because business leaders had to completely change their direction, their strategy, their priorities. They had to look at resource changes. They had to look at how are we going to enable our teams to work remotely overnight, literally. Industries across every industry and around the globe, we were immediately affected by what happened. And when things get VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, there is no one better positioned than someone who has been trained to manage chaos. And that's what I was telling my students in my audience when all this was happening. I said, listen, what project have you ever run that didn't have volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity? This is the space that we live in. Not only do we live there, we know how to take that chaos, manage it, and turn it into a well-oiled machine that is creating greater outcomes for the organization called projects. So this is what we're good at. So the first thing I told them to do is, listen, take a step back, take a deep breath, and remember, we've got this. This is what we do. So as project managers and PMO leaders, we forget that we actually hold the keys to the castle because we have the data. And the questions our business leaders were asking were things like, what if we have to put these projects on hold? What if we have to shift our resources here? What if we have to cut some of our contingent workforce? All of these what if questions were happening. And I can tell you, I know firsthand because a lot of my students were thriving this year and they were just killing it because they they had earned their seat at the table by being prepared to answer those questions the minute they were asked. They were getting tapped on the shoulder to do things like put a COVID testing center up in 3 days for one of the largest, medical health systems in the country, in the US. They were asked to help redefine how educational programs were going to work because all of a sudden there was no in-person learning.
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of things that those that have earned their seat at the table or had kind of built that credibility in the organization as somebody that can help lead through chaos. Those real scenarios have been happening for folks that are prepared to step into that leadership role and say, I got you. I've got the data. I've got the information you're looking for. I can give it to you in a streamlined fashion. I'm not going to throw 10 templates in front of you to answer your questions, right? Because by the way, no executive will ever come to you and say, no, hold on. Come back when you have 5 more templates for me to fill out, then we can start talking, right? That's never going to happen. So we've got to make it easy to answer their questions. We've got to make it easy for them to ask the questions. And we've got the keys. We can tell them what they need to know so that they can make educated and informed decisions quickly and keep moving the organization forward. So we've got that opportunity to earn that seat at the table if we don't already have it. And for those of us that did have it, the kind of year where those PMO and project leaders are having is phenomenal. Their careers are skyrocketing because they are helping them not just get through the initial chaos, but now figure out how do we move into this new normal in a more planful way, more prepared for the next chaotic experience, because this is just one of many things that can impact an organization, and we absolutely are perfectly positioned to answer that call.
So we've got about 20 different topics that we could talk about just in what we're talking about there. But I guess the traditional pillars of project management, so the golden triangle, time, scope, and cost. So you alluded to that a few times in a few ways there a few moments ago. So are we wrong to overly focus on these 3 pillars, or should we keep focusing on them? Or has the world just been turned upside down, the world of PMO?
So absolutely, knowing your schedule, your scope, your cost, your budget, your constraints are important. They are important inputs to the process of achieving not just a bunch of outputs, but of achieving outcomes. I think the challenge we have is that we, especially if you're certified in Prince 2 and PMP, whatever your certification is, there's a huge emphasis in project management on creating outputs. For example, if you get your PMP, like we have a PMP training program, inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques. That's what we're taught. That's what we're prepared for, right? So it's no fault of our own that that's where our strengths are. And our business leaders don't think in terms of outputs. They think in terms of outcomes. So they're thinking not just, is it on time and on scope and on budget? They're thinking about, will it help me achieve the return on investment? Whatever that return is, it's not always financial, but is it worth it to do this project in the first place? So the challenge we have with the golden triangle, and by the way, here's one of my favorites, EVM, earned value management. Do you know the one thing it doesn't measure? Value. It doesn't actually tell us anything about value. It says, did we spend the money we thought we'd spend? And therefore, we're going to assume that we've accomplished the scope we said we were going to accomplish. But even if we assume that we've accomplished that scope, it still doesn't address whether or not that scope actually is going to help us achieve, if it's going to be worth it. Right. Is that worth it factor there? So you absolutely want to know time, scope, and cost. And you want to make sure that you can measure the outputs you're creating. And if you don't also measure the outcomes that they're helping you achieve, and if you don't measure, is this project worth continuing? Is it worth doing? Will it help us achieve the business objectives we're intending to achieve? If you can't also answer those questions, then that's where we get back to we're speaking our project management deliverables language, and we're totally missing the opportunity to speak as business leaders, or as I call impact drivers, helping the organization actually move the ball down the field from delivering on their strategy. They're not delivering projects, they're delivering investments.
So EVM, earned value management as well. So is it kind of more around managing cost than measuring value, or why is calculating EVM not enough then in a project?
So it's not enough because when you think in terms of, so what it tells you is performance, past performance and expected performance
Mm-hmm.
in spending the money and in using the time and in using the resources and assumably that you're also creating that amount of scope. But let's look at it this way. If you're a project team, let's imagine you're running a project, you are on time, you are on scope, you are on budget because you locked down that scope so tightly that you got your triple constraint. Project team is off celebrating their success because they had the perfect golden triangle. They had the perfect EVM calculations. And because you controlled the scope so tightly, when the market shifted and the business leader said, you know what, we really need to add these 3 things to scope, or we probably shouldn't do the project anyway. And you were so busy controlling it and making it impossible for those changes to get done, then you've completely missed the ball. You're off celebrating your perfect golden triangle, and your business leaders see the project as a failure. They're waiting for phase 2 now to try and catch up to the market because it's taken them so long, and now they're missing their worth it opportunity. They're missing the opportunity to truly achieve the return on investment
Right.
that made that project worth doing in the first place, right? So that's where we've got to kind of separate. We got to step back and look at why we're doing the work we're doing, and is it helping the organization achieve its outcomes? And it's not just cost. And when I say return on investment, I don't mean that it's only dollars. Absolutely, you are investing dollars for projects. It's investment in time, energy, resources, focus, the cost of not doing other projects that could have achieved an ROI.
Right.
There are so many other things that the business leaders are considering. So your business leaders look at it as an investment, whether or not it's all about money. A lot of return on investment or worth it factor has to do with employee satisfaction, client, customer engagement, brand awareness. Not all projects are, if we spend this money, we better get this much money back. But every single decision we make all day long as individuals, as humans, is about, is it worth it to do this or not? We decide, is it worth it to listen to this podcast episode? Is it going to be worth my time? Is it worth it to, have coffee with my colleague when I'm really behind on other things I need to do? We make worth it factor decisions all day long. And so when we take a step back and just apply common sense and put that common sense into common practice, then we start thinking like our business leaders are thinking. And at the end of the day, if your retirement investment plan was perfectly on time, on scope, on budget, and you didn't make a darn dollar for all that money you were throwing in, it would be a big failure in your eyes, right? So it's just a
Exactly.
matter of shifting our perspective a bit.
So with that kind of shift and for people to change their mindset, their viewpoint, and as you say, just to step back and kind of not necessarily look at my big picture, but how my vignette fits into the big picture too.
Right.
And for years, we've been talking a lot about people don't like change. People are resistant to change. Well, some people. I love it myself personally. But controversially, Laura, you think change resistance is not a real thing. Tell us a little more about that.
Exactly. So imagine the most change resistant person on one of your projects, right? Just picture that person in your mind. And then let me ask you a few questions. Has that person ever been married? Has that person ever had a child on purpose? Has that person ever bought a new car, changed jobs, learned a new skill, picked up a hobby? I bet you the answer is yes to at least one of those. It's not actually change as much as it is how that change takes place. What people don't like is having change done to them. People don't like to be out of control of the change, right? They purposefully create change in their lives all day long. Little changes, trying a new restaurant, big changes, getting married, having children. There are all kinds of changes that we intentionally do to ourselves. So I think it's a myth that people are resistant to change. I think what people are resistant to is having change done to them. So if we, as project leaders, or as I call impact drivers, if we, again, take a step back and look at, are we doing this change to them, or are we making them a part of the solution? And if we can truly answer that question, honestly, we'll see that resistance is probably coming from the fact that they feel like that change is being done to them. And that's the best thing to look for. When you see resistance, it is to you. They are resisting you. They are resisting what you are doing to them. And because they feel out of control, they have fear of either not having control, not being a part of the solution, not being a part of the outcome, being afraid of what that outcome is going to do to them. So when you start the process over, right? If you get the chance to say, okay, let's hit the reset button here. How can I incorporate their feedback? How can I bring them into the fold? How can I ask the right questions? How can I engage them? How can I let them be a part of the solution? How can I take their input and let them help lead the charge in bringing this change about? How can I turn my haters, as I call them, into champions for the change by making them a part of the solution? When you do those things, even your biggest naysayers can come along on the journey with you, because you're making it about them and you're letting them have some control and a sense of ownership of that. And the best secret I can share on this: take the people that are the most resistant, that are very unhappy with the project you're creating or the PMO you're trying to implement. Pull them into the fold. Let them tell you all the things that are wrong with what you're trying to do. Then hand them the whiteboard marker, put them in front of the whiteboard and say, how would you solve this if this was your project? How would you address this? And then the beauty is you implement some of the things they suggest, and then you find them saying, that was my idea.
Yeah.
And before you know it, those haters are your advocates, because now they were a part of the process. They were a part of the solution. So I think we shortchange ourselves from a leadership perspective when we say, oh, that person's just change resistant, when that is really an opportunity for us to step into more of an emotionally intelligent leadership role and pull them into the process. Listen, stop trying to sell or convince people that your change is the right way. Nobody cares until you make it about them. So that's where our WIFM, what's in it for me, becomes super clear. We work with them to figure out what that is. We address their fears. We listen. We stop shoving stuff at them and let them talk to us about what's going on. And then we bring them into the fold. It's so much easier to, if you grab someone's hand and they're looking in the other direction, even if you're taking them to a really fun place, what's the first thing you do if somebody starts jerking you in the other direction? Your instinct is to pull back. Right? So if we then instead go stand next to them, walk with that person, talk with that person, let them help you navigate towards the future, you're going to get a lot less resistance and a lot more cooperation and build your champions of change, making it a heck of a lot easier for the next person that's resistant.
So engagement, not enforcement, is the way to go. But look they've been saying that for millions of years, you get more bees with honey.
Exactly. This is the same thing. A lot of these things are stuff that we know are common sense and we know are the kinds of things that we should be doing when it comes to our personal lives. And then we forget, so people become resources at work instead of people, right?
Yeah.
And the more we turn them into resources, the more we forget that all that common sense and all that stuff that we use to influence our husband or get our child to do their homework or, convince your best friend to go have coffee at this place instead of that one. All of those things we apply in the real world, we just need to apply them to the human beings that we're working with, and we'll see how much more effective we can be.
So while you have your big pin out now, bursting these little bubbles, tell me, what is the greatest myth about project management today, Laura, and how have you debunked it?
Okay, so
in your opinion, I should say.
Yeah, sure. Right. And listen, all of this is my opinion. And I invite people to challenge and to question it or to dig deeper and learn more about this. I talk a lot about these concepts on the PMO Strategies podcast. You've got lots of content about this stuff on your podcast. I think that this is an opportunity for people, if they're feeling a little uncomfortable with what they're hearing, I think this is an opportunity for people to step back and take a look at, gathering more information so they can be more informed and maybe open their eyes a little bit to different ways to consider it. Because at the end of the day, I believe there is no other profession more prepared for, more trained for, and more enabled to drive change in organizations, to be the strategy navigator to help organizations deliver on their strategy. And it means, and I think this is where the biggest myth is that we're actually project managers, because we're not. What we are is we are investment managers. We are managing the investments of our organization, just like your investment manager manages any of your investments or your, retirement savings plan. We have a fiduciary responsibility to organizations that we work in to care for that investment and to see that it achieves its worth it factor, no matter what that is. I believe that we need to stop calling ourselves project managers and think of us more as impact drivers. Think of our role as a business leadership role. We absolutely can have that seat at the table and be a business leader. And especially for our PMO leaders out there, you're not running a project. You're running, if you're talking about a business unit kind of PMO, not a temporary project office, but a real business unit PMO, treat it like a business unit, act like a business unit. Don't set up a charter, which is for a project. Get a business plan together. These are the ways that we're going to hold ourselves accountable for driving real impact in the organization. Hold us accountable to these measures, and here's how we're going to show value. So I think whether you're running a PMO or running a project, I think the biggest myth is letting ourselves get caught up in just because we learned a bunch of inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques, that is how we define ourselves. I think we need to stop defining ourselves on the number of outputs that we can create, the number of projects we've managed, the number of templates we do, the number of steps in our process. These are the wrong numbers. How beautiful our triple constraint is, how on time, on scope, on budget. Really, we need to understand what our biases are from our business leaders about what they care about,
Right.
about what helps them drive the outcomes for the organization, and look at ourselves as business leaders that can absolutely help the organization deliver on their strategy by simply shifting the way we think about the work that we do. Outcomes instead of just outputs. Impact and return on investment instead of triple constraint. I'm not saying you throw those things out the window, but just like the Agile Manifesto, it says we value this over that. We value this over that. Look at it. It's a bunch of common sense. Right? And that's what I'm talking about here. Run it like it's your business. Treat every project like it's an investment. And then you won't lose where you've come from. You'll use that as part of your tool set with where you're headed.
So, Laura, over the last 25 years, and you've been garnering this knowledge and experience, and you continuously give back to the PMO community, for sure. I know with your PMO Strategies podcast. And also you've got this year's PMO Impact Summit, which is on in September 14th to the 26th, right?
Right.
And we can talk about that maybe in a few minutes. But with all of this knowledge and experience that you have, Laura, tell me why you set up the PMO Strategies Conference, and what does it entail for you?
So the PMO Impact Summit started a few years ago because, again, like I mentioned, I find myself in a position where I'm constantly saying to the old me, the person that was building their first PMO like I did in 1999, or the person that's got beating their head up against the wall because they're so frustrated because they're really not being seen as that strategic business partner. They really haven't kind of broken through. They can't get their business leaders' attention. The projects aren't going the way they want them to. I look at those folks and I feel their pain. I remember what it was like to be like that. And I keep saying, I wish I had me when I was you. And now, not only do I have all of the knowledge that I've built from 15 years running PMOs and now 7 running PMO strategies and serving clients and students all over the world and seeing these wins and showing, teaching these things and seeing it work, not just for me, but for people all over the world. What I realized was, well, now I have more than just my knowledge. I was building this fantastic network of thought leaders from around the world that believe the same things I do around the role of project management and what we can do with it and the power of project management to change the world for the better and what the PMO is capable of. And so I said to several of them, hey, let's do something really cool. Let's give back to this community. Let's help this community. I don't want any PMO or project leader left behind. And that's really where it came from. That's why we do this event. It's grown every year. We have thousands of people already registered, and we're still over a month and a half away from the event going live. We have this mobile app and community where people are connecting and engaging, and in a safe place where they won't be judged, they won't be criticized, and they can ask questions. Because, and all of this comes back to, I wish I had that when I was in that role. And I didn't know the information was out there. And even when I did find stuff, a lot of it sent me down a path that my business leaders did not support.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to make sure that no PMO or project leader is left behind. That's why we make this event free. And that's why we run it over 2 weeks, not 2 days. We give people tons of time to watch the content, absorb the content, and one really cool thing we did this year is we added action taking resources for every single session. So you have over 80 sessions that you can watch. It'll probably be closer to 90 plus by the time we're actually at the event, because I keep adding more things. But you have all of these sessions you can watch across 12 or 13 different topic areas, from executive perspective and strategy to leadership to, professional skills to project portfolio management to agile, case studies of real PMO leaders doing this kind of work. And it's also that everybody that needs it does not have a barrier. The content runs 24 hours a day. So no matter where you are in the world, if you can understand it in English, because they are all in English, as if you can understand it in English, and you got an internet connection, that's all you need to participate. You can participate completely from the mobile app or from your computer. And it's all because now it's not just me. I've got access to all these other brilliant people that have so much to contribute to this community. And I think the rising tide raises all boats, right? So
Yes.
I want to support all the people that are supporting this community and giving their time and energy to help make sure that no PMO or project leader is left behind anywhere.
Well, Laura, I've looked at the PMO Impact Summit.com site, and you have, what did you say, 80 or over 80,
Over 80
speakers in this, which is very, very impressive. A very impressive number of very impressive guests, some of whom have already done podcasts with us here on Project Management Paradise. So without naming names, unless you'd like to, tell us, Laura, what is the most interesting thing that you've learned from a guest speaker from any of your PMO strategies?
Oh my gosh.
Favorite little nugget.
Oh my gosh.
It can even be
I
you.
don't even know how to answer that question. It's just phenomenal. Oh man. So that's the thing, is I think I don't even know if I could answer that question, because I think I'm learning something from every single session. Because the cool thing is I get to record all these sessions with speakers, and this is our 3rd year doing it. So I've got hundreds of sessions that I've listened to and participated in, whether it was an interview or a presentation. And I think what I have probably the biggest takeaway for me is to really open my mind to absorb as much of the information as possible. Because I'm learning new things about project portfolio management, different perspectives on agile, a lot of what I believe with respect to business leaders and the business focused mindset. All of these are things that I've absorbed along the way. So I think the best tip that I could give, I don't know if this is exactly answering your question, but I don't know how I possibly could, because the brilliance on these sessions, I'm telling you, I realize I'm a little bit biased, but I challenge anyone to show me a virtual event like this that is free, that has the high quality content, speakers, topic areas, ways for the community to engage. I've never seen anything like this, and that's why I built it, because I wanted to give back to this community wholeheartedly, and I've surrounded myself with people that believe the same. So it is not just an event, it is an experience. And the best thing for the audience listening that they can do is make the time to absorb the information and to take action on it. And that's why every session has an action taking resource, because we have to, you don't make an impact. It's called the PMO Impact Summit. You don't make an impact by listening to a great idea and then going back to what you were always doing. We get so busy, we forget to take action. So that's the goal here, is to make sure that people actually learn, explore new ideas. Don't let that but monster come crawling up on your shoulder. Be open to the fact that you might have a different way that you could do something, and then go try it out, go put it into action. I think that's possibly the best thing that I could say about all of it.
Well, I'll be signing up for sure, Laura, and I really look forward to it, because I know a few of the names and faces on there, and I look forward to meeting more, and I really look forward to seeing you again and meeting you hopefully online.
Absolutely.
And we'll put the details for that in the show notes as well at the end of the podcast. Laura Barnard, thank you so much, PMO lady, and we look forward to meeting you again over the airwaves.
Oh, it's just such an honor to be a part of your podcast and your program. And I'm just so grateful for all that you guys are doing to give back to this community as well. So thank you very much for having me here.
It's our pleasure.